I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Tonight, we're launching a multi-part series, a series of reports on the water crisis in eastern Oregon. It's not the drought we're talking about, by the way. It's the pollution of groundwater that thousands use for drinking and cooking. It's a big problem that involves powerful industries and state regulators and low-income people. Many do not speak English. Some may be undocumented. They have little political power, but they know their drinking water is tainted and they believe it's made them sick. It's too big of a story for one night. So over the course of this week, we're going to break it into pieces and take a look at the issue through the eyes of those involved. You'll see solutions are hard to come by, and we expect plenty of reaction from both you and elected leaders. I expect many will feel the outrage of a problem that has grown for more than 30 years. Oregon is a state that prides itself in its environmental stewardship, but in my opinion, there should be no pride over what's happened in the lower Umatilla Basin. The state's response has been a disgrace. "160 miles east of Portland, near the Columbia River, huge sprinklers shepherd along the growing season. Water is a precious commodity here. Average rainfall is only 9 inches a year, a fourth of Portland's total. During the growing season, irrigation water, much of it from the Columbia River, is delivered by the moving machines, quenching the thirst of growing crops. It creates perfect green circles on the otherwise tan canvas. This is part of the largest grassland in North America. While it's rare above ground, deep under the soil, there's lots of water. And that's where thousands of people not connected to city water systems get their supply, through private wells. And for most of Oregon's history, that water was safe to drink. But more than 30 years ago, that changed. And today the problem is worse than ever.
Yeah, this well here is 100 feet deep. The static level is 22 feet, and they used to be good, but they're not anymore.
Pat Suter began using his well 35 years ago when he moved into his home here outside the city of Boardman. Back then, he said, the water tested at about 4.5 parts per million with nitrate, a safe level according to the EPA. Nitrates are something you cannot see or taste. It's a chemical found in fertilizers and the waste of animals kept in feedlots and the water from commercial food production. In elevated amounts, it is dangerous in humans. The EPA set a limit of 10 parts per million for all public water systems. Concentrations below that are considered safe. Above that, not safe, especially for some groups, including young children and pregnant women. Recently, experts tested Pat's well water again. He said the new reading showed nitrates at 37 parts per million. That's nearly 4 times the danger level.
We quit drinking this water. I quit drinking it about 10 years ago when I got remarried. My wife, they wouldn't drink this water, and it didn't taste right, so we've been on bottled water for 10 years.
And your previous wife died of cancer?
Yeah, she did. She drank about 3 pots of coffee a day for all the time we was here.
And a number of dogs?
And I've lost 16 dogs here with cancer.
You think it's the water?
I do.
No tests have been able to pinpoint the water as the cause in the death of Pat's wife or his dogs. But he and many others in eastern Oregon believe the water is indeed deadly. Up until the recent test, Pat's current wife, Sylvia, used the water for cooking. You might think that's a good idea, since boiling kills most things. But it's bad when it comes to nitrates. Boiling concentrates them and makes things worse.
I got pissed off because I was like, what are we gonna do now? Yeah, animals. We have cows and the dogs and chickens, and we don't want all that to get sick and die because of the water.
Now she's had enough.
The first thing came to me is like, it's time to move. Yeah, we need to find somewhere else that is not contaminated yet.
They would leave, but Pat worries they're stuck. And they're not alone.
How in the hell do you sell your place when you can't, the well won't test? That's the big thing around here. I mean, you're stuck. You can't sell these places.
The contaminated aquifer lies beneath a huge section of land. 562 square miles covering northern Umatilla and Morrow counties. It includes the towns of Echo, Stanfield, Hermiston, Umatilla, Oregon, and Boardman. As many as 12,000 people could be at risk, according to the government. While you can't see it from above the ground, the fields here have vast pools of water underneath them. That's the aquifer. In the area we're focused on, as many as 4,500 private wells have drilled down through the surface to get water from the aquifer for drinking and cooking, bathing, and more. But over the decades, that pollution in the form of nitrates from farm fertilizer, commercial food production, and large animal operations have seeped down through the ground into the water and now contaminated. It's worse in some areas than others. When people use their wells in the contaminated areas, they pull up water that looks clean but is actually polluted with nitrates. That's bad because nitrates can cause cancer and many other problems. Maria Martinez lives in the danger zone but thought her well water was safe.
I was pregnant, and then for us consuming all the water, the bad water that's here, we're just consuming it. And I was pregnant at the time, and I didn't even know that I was pregnant with my first pregnancy, and I was consuming the water. And then so I miscarried that baby. And then again, I got pregnant again. And then still drinking the water without knowing it was contaminated, another one.
She had 2 miscarriages. She cannot prove they were caused by the water, but she believes they were. She said when she moved into her home 32 years ago, the well testing showed safe levels of nitrates, far below 10 parts per million.
Recently that we got it checked, it was like 45, really sky high.
Wow.
Yeah,
For
very.
nitrates,
Yeah,
45?
very high.
And it's not supposed to be above 10.
No.
What was your reaction when you saw that number?
Like, oh, I'm like, wow. I couldn't believe it because we were drinking from that water. We were even bathing. My kids were even in the pool and all that with that water, just never thinking that that water was, poisonous to us.
She said they drank the water until April of this year, when the tests came back so high. Raymond Akers, who lives near Maria, had a similar experience. He bought his home 24 years ago, and back then said the nitrates in his well water tested at just 4.3 parts per million. So he didn't worry about it until he recently heard the concern of neighbors.
My wife and I, we rushed in and got some bottles and spent I believe it was $110 to have our well tested. And it had went in that amount of time, it went from the 4.3 to 27.4.
Wow. What was your reaction to seeing the number?
I was shocked.
He too immediately switched to bottled water, and it brought a startling change in his health.
I've been fatigued for the last, 10, 15 years. I just didn't have no energy. Never put no relation to it. Don't know if it is related, but I can tell you when I stopped drinking the water, I found a whole level of energy I hadn't had in 15 years. I was pretty heavy then, and I dropped 70 pounds in just over 6 months after I quit drinking that water.
Wow, 70 pounds.
The energy level that I had to get out of the house and go do something.
Like all the others I met, he cannot prove the water made him sick, but he does believe it did. Luz Barajas thinks the water led to her husband's death. My colleague Celeste Ruiz, KGW's digital director, translated as we talked. She said they moved into a home 10 years ago outside the Boardman city limits. They were warned from the beginning the water was not safe to drink, but her husband sometimes ignored that.
Cuando ya nos cambiamos aquí, él sembró esos árboles que están y venía a regar y no traía agua, pienso que tomaba de eso.
Tomaba agua de la llave de su esposo, sí.
De esa ahí, pensamos que de eso se empezó, porque estaba bien y de repente empezó con tos y todo eso.
She said her husband died 4 years ago. Ruth Lopez is her daughter-in-law. Ruth and her husband bought a mobile home in the contaminated area 3 years ago. It was so well known the water was bad that the bank would not give them a loan until they put in filters and got it tested. Still, she won't use the water.
Pues estamos mirando que el agua está muy afectada. No sirve para tomar ni para cocinar.
Like many I met, she finds it hard to believe it's been going on this long.
Se me hace mucho, digo, wow, 30 años y no pueden hacer nada. Entonces como que uno dice, te desilusionas de que dices, ay, Pues si hace 30 años no pueden hacer nada con más ahorita, ¿verdad?
That's right, 30 years.
Today, with great pride, it gives me a good feeling to be able to announce that Oregon again is leading the nation in preventing pollution.
Back in 1989, Oregon's legislature passed the Oregon Groundwater Quality Protection Act. Its goal is to prevent contamination of groundwater throughout the state, to conserve and restore it, and to maintain it for future generations. The law also required statewide testing of groundwater. Tests revealed the water in the lower Umatilla Basin was polluted, with many readings showing nitrates above 7 parts per million, the state's threshold for danger. The Department of Environmental Quality declared a groundwater management area. The purpose of that declaration was to identify and implement practices that would reduce the nitrate levels and ultimately reduce the groundwater nitrate concentrations to below that 7 parts per million. It has failed in nearly every step of the journey. To begin with, it took 4 years to find and report the 5 leading causes of contamination. It took 2 more years to form a committee to do something about it. A full 7 years after the declaration, the committee, made up of government and industry officials, decided a voluntary plan of action would be best. Now in 2023, the state is on its 3rd committee, and the nitrate contamination is not better. It's worse, leaving residents like Mike Pearson furious.
These people don't give a damn what's going on. If they do, they damn sure don't do anything about it.
Now, the state and industry will tell you they are doing something about it, but fundamentally, he is right. The pollution is not getting better. It is getting worse, and it's documented. Tomorrow night, we'll take a look at the issue through the eyes of a farmer in the area and also look at what industry is and is not doing. Wednesday, we'll dive into the role of the regulators and ask where they've been all these years. And then Thursday, we'll show you what is finally happening in the area and why many think it's still not nearly enough. So you can see it's a lot. In the meantime, we welcome your feedback. What do you think about what's happening there with the groundwater? Do you have a solution, an idea if things might be getting better? Are there problems in your area that you want to share? Please send us an email, communicate with us. Our address is thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you. Coming up next on The Story, we'll stay in eastern Oregon for a moment to update you on that big rail project in Malheur County that has sucked up tens of millions of taxpayer dollars with very little to show for it. We do have a bit of good news to share about that, plus what happens next with the development when The Story returns. Earlier this month, we brought you this great story from the Malheur Enterprise newspaper about a troubled rail project in eastern Oregon that seemed on the verge of yet another debacle. It's a taxpayer-funded rail station in the tiny town of Nyssa called Treasure Valley Reload Center. The idea is to help farmers there ship products like onions to market by rail instead of truck, which apparently is faster, more reliable, and a bit cheaper. The project's original cost of $26 million in taxpayer dollars has ballooned north of $40 million now. The state has suspended funding, and the company that was supposed to run the place has pulled out. The update we gave you was that 3 miles of the railroad were designed by folks connected to the reload center and built without approval from Union Pacific Railroad, meaning the long-delayed, over-budget project faced the real possibility of having to rip up all that work and start over, costing yet more time and money. But good news. To the relief of project leaders and for you, the taxpayer, Union Pacific ended up approving the design change after all. So great news. But there still is a lot of uncertainty ahead, namely if the rail station will even operate in the way it was intended. Over the summer, the company expected to run the facility bailed, saying the project was not financially viable. So right now it's on pause as the county developers search for a new company to take over the site and potentially create a whole new plan for its future. Turning now to the addiction crisis in Oregon, public pressure and frustration is growing when it comes to the lack of action by elected leaders to address things like open-air drug use, especially here in Portland. You, I'm sure, are feeling it yourself. Today, another discussion on solutions, this time by a new nonprofit led by former Republican candidate for governor Christine Drazan. She brought in lawmakers from both sides of the aisle, as well as police and recovery providers. Blair Best shows us how it went.
As a deadly crisis grips the streets of Portland with no sign of letting go, state leaders talked of what to do in a small conference room off Northeast Sandy Boulevard.
Our purpose today is to discuss addiction in Oregon.
Led by former candidate for governor Christine Drazan, state representatives, along with leaders in Portland's recovery field and even the head of a Southeast Portland neighborhood association, all raised concerns around open-air drug use and, of course, ballot measure 110, the decriminalization of certain amounts of hard drugs.
This is not an easy issue. There are no simple or easy fixes to this.
The legislature is taking this topic very seriously. We know that the rollout of ballot measure 110 has not gone as smoothly as we have liked for a lot of reasons.
We have made it easier to stay where you're at than it is to get the help.
Okay, let's take a pause. If you've been following these issues at all, you're probably thinking to yourself right now, another meeting. A group of local decision makers are once again getting together to talk about the drug crisis. Will anything come of this? Well, we asked them. And here's what they said.
And I think if you don't create points for the public to engage and to continue to advance these concerns, then you are going to have a political outcome that's not always responsive to the public.
This meeting is all part of Drazan's nonprofit called A New Direction, focused on advocating for solutions outside of an election cycle. 30 minutes in, we heard the first talks of any such solutions.
I still believe that repealing 110 is the way you wipe the slate clean, but you can't leave it there.
I'm for stopping drug. That we need to have new goals. We need to have a fresh look at this.
Another hot topic, law enforcement's role in all this.
And the concern that law enforcement has is we don't want to move back to the world where we only can take people to jail, but we have so many services that are being paid for, but those service places need to want to partner with law enforcement, not because law enforcement's the solution, but because in the absence of silos, we can all work together to make these contacts work better.
Now, let's not forget a new legislative committee focused on addiction just formed in Salem, and the governor is also leading a task force here in Portland focused on similar issues. So there's lots of discussions happening right now, but what will come from all of this, we'll see come next year's short legislative session. Meanwhile, today we heard from Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler's office, and they tell us he's very concerned about drug use in Portland and Measure 110, but that he sees this as a state issue and says it's up to state leaders to work together to address it. Blair Best, KGW News.
Thanks, Blair. Hopefully we'll find an answer. Doesn't matter which side of the aisle it comes from. It's Monday, and on the story, that means we're digging for old. We're going to explore the Oregon Historical Society's archives when it comes to whales. Yep, there was an explosive anniversary over the weekend, and we found some items that we think are worth a second look. Details when the story returns. The KGW Great Toy Drive is going on now, and this week, internet provider Ziply Fiber will donate a portion of all new installs up to $3,500. If you'd like to help drop off a new unwrapped toy at any IQ credit union, Fred Meyer, or local Toyota dealership, or you can make a cash donation online and we'll shop for you. Go to kgw.com/toy and click Donate Cash. Help bring a little joy to local kids this holiday season. For tonight's edition of Digging for Old, we're inspired by a big anniversary that actually happened yesterday. Sunday marked the 53rd year since a dead sperm whale was literally blown to bits by dynamite in Florence along the Oregon coast. I'm laughing because the video, I'm sure you've seen it. It was a creative and, well, bad idea for disposing of a carcass. And this is the moment where we would usually show you some of that video that we found in the KGW vault. Turns out, though, that we do not have that footage from 1970. The famous clips you've no doubt seen come from another station in town, meaning we do not have the right and cannot use it. But the anniversary of the exploding whale did have us wondering what kind of whale items the Oregon Historical Society has in its collection, and we were not disappointed. This is the first thing that comes up when you search there. It's described as an irregular shaped portion of a whale's jawbone that is visibly porous throughout. But it's what is carved into the bone that makes this so exceptional. You can probably make out the L-E-W along the middle there, but the letters that are tough to see are the M at the front and the I at the end. So we'll save you from spelling puzzle nightmares in your head. Try Meriwether Lewis. That's right. This bone dates back to 1805 and is believed to be connected to the Lewis and Clark expedition. There's a reference to in their journals about a winter camp outside of Astoria. A whale had washed ashore near what is now Seaside, and the expedition members tried to buy some of the blubber. The bone in the Historical Society's collection was found by a man named Jack Nemi back in 1967 near Seaside. This little leather wallet of sorts also has ties to the Lewis and Clark expedition. It's from around the year 1800. Back then, these were called a housewife. There's a pocket lined with a white silk, and the note in the note card reads, "My grandfather George Shannon carried this housewife all through the Lewis and Clark expedition from St. Louis, Missouri to the Columbia mouth and back to his home." Shannon was part of the Corps of Discovery as the expedition was coined. This was donated to OHS by his great-granddaughter back in 1946. You're probably wondering, okay, but what does a wallet have to do with whales? Well, for that, we need the help of our editors. Let's look at the wallet again. Near the eye of the needle, there are 3 little designs. At the bottom there are 3 dots. Above that, a little sun. Can you see that? And researchers guess that the design along the top is probably a whale. I'm not sure. What do you see? The last item we found in the Historical Society's collection is odd to say the least, but keep that in mind. Here it is. It's described as a creature with 7 sets of legs, one each from human, elephant, goat, bird, tiger, and kangaroo, with human arms in the middle. Horse head holding an apple in the teeth, goat horns, whale, and kangaroo tails. That's where we get the whale connection. See how we did that? The little speech bubble reads, "I'm a snake," with the artist's signature on the opposite side, Matt Gallagher. And while it's odd, the drawing's origin story is a fun mystery. It was found behind a drawer in a desk that was donated to the Historical Society in 2012 by a man named Samuel Crawley. He bought the desk in Salem back in 1964 and used it in Eugene, San Francisco, and Portland. So, who knows when it was lost. But if you know Matt Gallagher, you can tell him the Oregon's Historical Society has his creature. We'd love to hear any stories that you have. You know the drill, the story at kgw.com. That's our show. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.